We're at the epicenter of the initial outbreak. WA1, Washington 1, is considered the ancestral model strain. This center...
I developed the ancestral model strain. I created it.
That's right. You let it loose.
I was in my kitchen.
You let it loose. Yeah. Right. Okay. Gain of function. Here we come. You're making arancia, Italian meatballs, and that's a gain of function.
Okay.
All right, and welcome to News from the Pew, where we take the news from around the interwebs and distill it down so it's not as frightening. I am your host, Rick Barrett, and I am joined by three gentlemen that would never be caught during a raid at Mar-a-Lago. We have Steve Cunningham from CensusFidelium.tv. We are joined by the wonderful Jonathan Arrington from the state of Florida. We hope that his house will not be raided today during the show. And of course, once again, Fawaz Yazzie joining us from the great state of Kentucky. Make sure you follow Fawaz. I told you last week, you got to follow him on Instagram at Catholic King, or Catholic Kings, I believe it is. You can correct me in a moment, but you just released another sample song for us that is an absolute hit. Yeah, he's got to follow him there. You can either listen to me or not, but you're missing out. Another great one there from Fawaz. But this week's show, as we were talking before, it's a little difficult to give you news from the pew because of the events that took place Monday night of the week of this recording. And the thing that really jumped out to everybody is the clear indication that there is no going back to normal politics. Trump broke everybody. And in case you don't know, in case you're just finding out, on Monday night, the FBI, 30 FBI agents went to Mar-a-Lago in Florida, which is where Trump's home base is, and they executed a raid. Now, the people in the liberal establishment and Democratic Party don't want you to call it a raid, but you had 30 FBI agents walking around his home for 9.5 hours and refused to present the warrant to the lawyer that was on the premises for the Trump family. And then they walked out with 15 boxes of things. Now, at first, it was supposedly because of the National Archives and some of the things that were recovered. You might want to sit down because this is pretty intense. It was a dinner menu. It was a napkin. It was some of these high-profile items that were absolutely necessary for national security. And the real problem is that the Trump family has said they are more than happy to be cooperative with the FBI, and there was no need to have this shock and awe raid take place on them. But it's also the reflection of an establishment, both on the left and the right, that seems to be more critical or more leaning into that authoritarian streak. So what we'll do is we'll just throw this we'll go John, Fawaz, and then Steve. John, you're in the state of Florida. Not that it really matters, but let me ask you your reactions to the Trump raid, and what do you see going here for us politically?
What I'll say is effectively copied from comments that I heard Chris Ferrara give on, and I may have mentioned this already before, but I think it's worth repeating because it was such a brilliant insight. So Chris Ferrara at the Roman Forum, a little Catholic traditionalist get together almost every summer in Lake Garda, brought up the thought of this Italian philosopher guy who's now been kind of more or less canceled. His name's Giorgio Agamben. I'll give the name there, and then we can maybe put it in the show notes afterwards. But I think this guy nailed it even a few years ago, actually before the COVID stuff. He's been repeating it a lot since the COVID stuff. And that is that what we're basically living in is kind of a post-state era when, there are still laws officially on the books, and there's still, even in most European and even a lot of South American countries, just as in the old USSR, there are still sorts of divisions of powers and guaranteed rights, and that you can't be illegally searched or have things seized without some version of a warrant. I mean, even in the old USSR, they had these things on the books officially. But that we're effectively in an era where nobody pays any attention to that anymore. At least those who are in power in the current governments. The big change, though, that as far as I can tell, is that this is the first time that it's become really clear in America that one side is just simply going after the dissidents on the other side with no mercy, no pretense of any sort of misbehavior of any sort. I mean, Trump making it public and pretty clear that he was willing to cooperate should have been enough for anybody with half a brain. And the thing that terrifies me is I would have expected the left-wing networks to kind of have radio silence about it all. But the fact, I mean, I know, like Colbert and all those, they're so laughably ridiculous. But the fact they're even cheering about it yesterday, that scares me, because that's when you know that any, what would we say, not, I don't know, just any sort of moral qualms about this unleashed power of the state to basically call an audible whenever they want, and not have any worries about the fact that it goes contrary to all the laws that are on the books, but just basically saying it's necessary to preserve the state, or necessary because it's an emergency. Therefore, we can basically do whatever we want. And again, just this, there was an Italian philosopher who's been talking about this for several years, even pre-COVID. And before it seemed like maybe it was just going to be during COVID they did this. No, now it's clear that they're going to pull out all the stops to basically, I think, instill terror in us as much as they can. That if we dare to get on their wrong side, sure, they may not dig up any dirt on us, but if we're not uber rich, we'll never be able to afford the lawyers' fees to fight back, or to gain any semblance of true civil freedoms that we should be guaranteed. So it's kind of it's a nerve-wracking time for middle class and lower middle class families because of this sort of bullying tactics that those in power are using in the U.S. right now. So some sort of first, I think.
Yeah. So let's go to the actual video summary of it now that we've talked about it a little bit
The
with
details, Kennedy,
John.
get worse and worse. The agents were apparently there from 9 a.m. to 6:30. 9 a.m. to 6:30. That is 9.5 hours as they're scouring through Melania's closet, breaking open safes. Apparently, the attorneys were not allowed in. They were told to turn off security cameras, which they did not do. Good move. There was a Ryder truck on the scene. Apparently, the DOJ lawyers, according to Trump representatives, were very rude, and they kept saying over and over again, we have full access to everything. We can go anywhere. It feels like the full power of the federal government raining down on a political enemy.
Caught me off guard there, right? So, real quick about the warrant thing, and then we'll jump to Fawaz, and I just want to let Steve hang on that as long as possible. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't even play one on the radio or on TV, but warrants are very specific. They're saying what you're looking for. Now, if you're looking for a TV, you can't look through a closet, all right? You can't rummage through a house. There's no such thing as a warrant that gives you full access to a home. That's why I have a lawyer on the scene, and that's why I have the warrant to actually keep the law enforcement agency within the lines. The fact that all this was discarded shows, unfortunately, the rhetoric that the rule of law is essentially dead. So, Fawaz, I'll throw it to you. Your thoughts on the raid and politics between the left and the right, quote unquote, going from here?
Well, yeah, well, like you said, and Jonathan, this is unprecedented, but the issue I have here with this, as you stated, they took a warrant, which is supposed to be specific. I guess the safe was what they were looking for. It was empty. But the problem with that is they can do whatever they want, because even when you go to the highest power to try to complain, it was the highest power who called this on. It's like having, a bishop or a cardinal that's not teaching Catholic doctrine and Catholic dogma, and you say, well, I'm going to write a letter to the Pope. Well, problem is sometimes the Holy Father is in the same ideological understanding of the church as some of these cardinals. So you can't really go to the hierarchy because you have a lot of the stuff is coming from the higher ups. Now with Trump, the biggest issue here with him is he ran in 2016 with the promise of draining the swamp. He didn't drain the swamp. As a matter of fact, the very FBI leader, Ray, was appointed by him, who ended up biting him in the behind, later on. To call a raid and a warrant over some national archive, it's like, the FBI banging at your door because you forgot to return some books at the library. This is ridiculous. Obama, held on to his boxes. They were asking for them for years. He wouldn't give them up. He wasn't raided. You had a lawyer for Hillary who stuffed classified information down his pants. He wasn't raided. Remember her in 2016 with the whole email scandal. She wasn't raided. But who was raided? Even during Trump's time, we had Assange, Stone. Even now we have Bannon. And Trump's being raided. So clearly you have one side that took over power and is flexing their power, knowing the other side can't do anything about it. And you have McCarthy talking about put us in power or hold the hearing, which is equivalent to writing a strongly worded letter, which does nothing other than the fact that it brings in more fundraiser to your party because they're worthless, the Republican Party. And Trump's second term was supposed to be him draining the swamp. Now, I don't know if he signed the executive order, which is called Schedule F in October of 2020. He signed that, which was supposed to make it a lot easier for him to fire bureaucrats and government authorities and employees. He signed that in October 2020, got some media attention, but then it went away because of the whole, January 6th problem. So he could have signed that just to get his base riled up again and gone back to the status quo. He added some of the swamp that he's been complaining about himself. So, this is absolutely unfortunate with what's going on. I think they're clearly going after him, or it's theater. That's going to be one or the other. We were saying this for the longest time.
So I think it's a very interesting point that you said that. We'll come back to that after we get our first round in. So Steve, Foz mentioned it. The Republicans are saying, oh, well, if you put us in power 3 months from now, we'll hold hearings in another 6 months. And you have Republicans and shock jock and commentators and Republican talking heads, conservative talking heads talking about how bad the FBI is and the DOJ and how corrupt everything is. Steve's got a very simple solution to all of this. If you don't want to deal with the FBI, if you don't want to deal with all of these things, Steve, what's your simplistic solution to just not having to worry about the DOJ or the FBI or any of these other people?
Sorry, I'm trying to breathe right now. But
I held you.
I wear one of these things with a muzzle. It doesn't work too well. Yes, it's a clown show. It's the clown. Thank you for somebody to send me the clown. It's warm in the winter, which you'll have to wear in Germany. So maybe the Germans need to wear something like that. Yes, divorce from D.C. I don't know, secession, whatever you want to call it, national divorce, declaring independence. You immediately leave the FBI, the IRS, which 87,000, we'll get to that later, was 87,000 IRS members were hired the other day to get you, by the way. And let's see what else. You get out of Biden's reign, Pelosi, Michael Steele, you never have to hear from again. And there's a lot of great pros out of that. I mean, you immediately get a pay raise too. I mean, what's the old thing? You have to work 4 months into April and May so to pay the government before you start making a paycheck. Oh, you keep a lot more of that. Obviously, you have to worry about your state then afterwards, which you should be. And then people were talking about you got to convert the state, which I mentioned before. And Abbeville Institute's Dr. Don Livingston's mentioned that before as well. Break away, then convert the state. But yeah, if you think this is going to get any better, pass the hookah pipe because you're smoking something good. There's let me play a couple other things right here. There's the U.S. was it Dana? What's his name? Dana something from the UFC.
Oh, Dana White.
Dana White. He mentioned a little bit of something on here.
Liberal Democrat. I voted for Biden. I'm not going to vote for Trump if he runs for re-election. I want to have the right to vote against him. I don't want to see bureaucrats deny me that right to vote against him. That's what democracy is. And this is part of it, I think, an attempt to try to get him disqualified from running. I don't think it's going to work. I think it actually probably has strengthened his base of support. Look, there are three kinds of people out there. There are the anti-Trump haters, for whom anything that happens to Trump, Professor Lawrence Tribe, doesn't matter. He'll trash the Constitution to get Trump. Then there are the Trump lovers. It doesn't matter how much evidence they might have. It's not possible that Trump did anything wrong. And then there's the vast majority of neutral Americans who want to see justice done, who want to see fair justice. They don't want a different rule for Hillary Clinton and Sandy Berger on the one hand and President Trump on the other hand. They want to see equal justice under the law.
Yeah, like someone else brought up about him running for 2024. Yeah, it's all about 2024, and I don't understand why. Because if 2020 happened the way it did, do anybody really think that that's not going to happen again in 2024? And then on top of that is, the terror that Jonathan brought up, the law thing, the calling your neighbors, in the sense with January 6th and COVID, all that's tied in. They told your neighbors to rat on your neighbor during that. And when January 6th hit, there was actually billboards all up and down the interstates. I remember seeing two here. If you know somebody, which I did, call in your neighbor, call them in to basically get them arrested. You see these guys like, I know Brian McClanahan brought up what you saw with Lincoln when he suspended habeas corpus. You're seeing now with what's going on with the January 6th trials, people being arrested, like the old lady that stood in there that you see and just stood there with, like the flag. She's arrested. All these guys are basically thrown in jail without, basically a monkey trial, kangaroo trial, and almost lack the key. Whereas you got these, how many bunch of people in like Chicago right now getting away? There's a law out there saying don't even arrest people that are breaking the law or killing people. You're not even allowed to do that there. So yeah, it's not just a banana republic, but it's what Father Roth has talked about in almost every of his Sunday sermons about Romans 1:20. When you stop praying, your thinking goes in vain. And we're just, it's insanity. The clown thing, the clown plane on top of that, we're beyond that. It's just something it's a good name right now I use just to laugh, to not cry, because it's so bad when it's just going to get worse as the decade goes on. We got the things about, the cobalt digging that's going on, and people dying, being buried alive so that you can get these EV cars that don't work. The food rationing. The thing that happened in Germany just the other day, New York City saying they're going to throw their migrants down to Texas because you can't have it. It's okay when Texas has an influx of people coming in, but it's not okay when that happens to the wrong team city. So they're trying to bust people down from New York City down into Texas. Yes, the only political solution is not voting harder come November. It's getting the heck out of this dysfunctional union. When I listened, I heard Beck the other day or this morning. Glenn Beck's a former Catholic. He left the church because he wanted to get divorced, and he blamed alcohol, not himself. He blamed the tool for it, so he became a Mormon, so he can get around all this and get a new wife and all that. So if he's okay with divorce, and most people in the world are okay with divorcing in the world. Now, we're not saying in the church. I'm saying most people in secular society. Why is it that you have to stay in this dysfunctional union for the rest of eternity and not even think about breaking up this union? How is that? What realm? It's a religion. It's not even Americanism that Leo XIII talked about. It's this idea. For our Jonathan brought up Chris before in his book Liberty, the God That Failed. He brings up how secular holidays is basically almost a parallel of the church. How the flag is treated with more reverence than the Blessed Sacrament. When it's a religion that we can't even think about. We can't break this thing up. That's heresy. And again, when you talk about, Lincoln wasn't a good dude, that's like blasphemous. That's almost like saying Christ wasn't a good guy. In the religion you have the temple. It literally says temple in D.C. You go up there and you do your genuflections at this. We have to get our minds just torn or just reconfigured to say we can live without DC. Now, that takes out a lot of Fox News. That takes out CNN. Those guys are pretty much, gone in a sense. They don't know they wouldn't know what to do. But it's a thing that has to happen. It's decentralization, getting back down to the local, getting back in your neighborhood. But the founders even talk about it. James Madison said, I think it was 3,000. Jonathan can maybe help me out on this. It was they were using the Romans at this time, but that the extreme level for a republic was like 3,500 or maybe 30,000. I can't remember exactly. I know it was a 3 involved in it. At 3,500 people or something like that, maybe 30,000. Even New York City, in a sense, should be broken down because that's unmanageable. I mean, no taxation without representation was the argument in 1776. We're at what? 1 million representatives to 1 representative in DC. How is that taxation with representation? You're actually at the worst level now, and they don't care what you think. In sense of IRS thing, when you get ready for everybody on here to get audited in the not so distant future, you probably may get thrown in jail like a Wesley Snipes or something. Who knows? For something simple. I mean, there's that old joke: somebody's breaking a law every moment of the day because there's so many laws. I mean, the FDA. I just saw a text. A friend of mine might be moving to Kentucky. What's his face? Massey.
Yep.
He has a thing with John Stossel talking about how he goes down 15 minutes away to have a cow basically butchered, so that he doesn't have to drive an hour and a half, 3 hours to the FDA approved one. And it's only FDA approved because it has a shower for the guy there and an extra bathroom and a larger office. It's nothing to do with cleanliness. It's nothing to do with how good the beef comes out. It's only about what the pencil pushers are wanting to do. And that's all it is. This is more pencil pushing, more laws, more this. I mean, the Inflation Act that just came through. So they want to spend $780 million or $1 billion and says that's going to help inflation. So you spend more, which they gave another billion over to $1 million. Was it $1 million or $1 billion? I lost count. Billion over to Ukraine. And someone made a joke. They couldn't get you $500 during the Rona lockdown, but in a snap of a finger, they send that much money over to Ukraine. We are being played, and it's not even funny. They're doing it right in front of your face and just saying, vote for us next time. I mean, and this thing with Trump. Okay, I'm not the biggest Trump guy. I'm never a big as anybody fan. I think they all suck. There's a guy that's now Senator Vacantis had a great line when he wasn't one. Said, I look at politicians as diapers. They should be changed, and for the same reasons. I mean, he didn't drain any swamp. The swamp is still there. I mean, for real. When someone told me they drained the swamp when they had Mustache Man that can't wait to bomb the planet as his Secretary of Defense. The swamp you can't drain it. The only way to do it is killing the beast, and then starving the beast, as in breaking away, which the states you have to have the states around for DC to stay alive. It's not the other way around. The DC did not create the states created DC. Starving that beast will be a lot better for everyone's lives, and it has to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, and then we'll jump back to John with the Banana Republic and the idea of where do we go and how do we navigate from here. But since February of this year, in the Ukraine, anybody want to take an informed guess about how much money they've received since February of this year?
45 billion or something, 45 billion?
No.
I can't remember. I saw it. I can't remember right now.
I'm going to say 55 billion.
Okay. Quaz, you want to jump in on this?
I would just send 45 just the other day. So I'm going to, maybe 60, 55, 60.
$9.8 billion since February of this year have been sent to the Ukraine.
Should have went $1. $1. We would have won Price is Right.
That's right. Y'all got to go lower next time. But think about that. Steve makes a point. Remember, they were arguing over $600 for any of us during the Rona. I don't know if they deserve it. I don't know if you. That's a lot of money, but Zelensky needs like a new Ferrari, and they send over another $1 billion. It was $4.5 billion that was approved, and $1 billion was for weapons. So I don't know where the other $3 billion is going for the people in the Ukraine. Ukraine is the Chinese shop of the Chinese restaurant of Europe. They're just funneling money through it, and everybody's just kind of acting on the other side like, oh, okay. Steve?
I forgot to mention one of the representatives, Jonathan may know him, down in Florida was a Sabatini.
Yeah.
You see his tweet the other day. It is time for the Florida legislature to call an emergency legislative session and amend our laws regarding federal agencies. Sever all ties with the DOJ immediately. Tell me that does not speak of breaking away. How do you do that? You break away. That's a call for independence right there.
There's a lot of people walking up to the line right now in various places like the Federalists and other areas. They're starting to accept it because when you have this abuse of power by the DOJ under the Brandon administration, the dark Brandon administration, you have to look at it because how do you go back? They're going to do, obviously it shows they're going to do whatever they can to keep the reins of power. They'll do whatever they can to get rid of political opponents. And people think that a 2022 midterms are going to do anything. No, they're not going to do anything because the FBI is an executive branch and they'll do whatever they can, obviously, to intimidate people from not even wanting to run. So, John, I know we all went back and forth, and the clearest parallel people are drawing is Caesar in this regard. I don't know if you want to touch on that here and to see if that parallel is true or if there's any, because I don't believe history repeats. As a historian, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. But the idea that we're seeing something similar to that, what do you think about that, John?
I'd say no matter what sort of similarities there are with Caesar, I think for our purposes as Catholics, even if historically there's more to learn from there, I think for our intents and purposes, it might not be quite as useful just because there weren't Catholics yet. The interactions of Judaism with the Roman, for part of the time Roman Republic and then Roman Empire, is kind of distinct from what we do as Catholics. But more what I would look at and compare is the attitude, the habits, and the actions of the early Christians before Constantine. Because I agree substantially with the usefulness of the examples that Steve gave us. Ryan would probably add to as well if he were here. My only concern, because again, my area of focus as a student was patristics when I did my doctorate in there in Rome, is that the early church, their focus wasn't on creating a parallel state. It was on trying to convert the people that are there. I mean, they had some beasts, some just devils that were probably as bad, maybe in some cases worse, maybe some cases not quite as bad as our bad guys. And their method was to try to convert everyone they came in contact with, especially the lower and middle classes. They did a great job with the lower classes everywhere they went. And that's probably something that I dare offer one little critique, modest critique to the traditional communities. We ought to be going after a strong and sincere charity-filled evangelization of the lower classes in which we find a lot of our chatty parishes. Humbly, it seems to me like we're not doing that, at least collectively, and that would be the way in which we're recreating if you will, the style in which the early Christians converted the empire. Because I mean, if there's really two cities, like St. Augustine says on the City of God, I mean, the city we're trying to build up and that we should be spending most of our energy trying to build up. It's not that we just completely walk away from all things in regard to the secular world, but the city we should be spending most of our energy trying to build up is the city of God. That is the Catholic Church, as St. Augustine said. So, I would just kind of maybe add, not a rebuttal to what Steve was saying, because most of his examples, I think they're spot on as far as how terrifying it is that the situation we're in. And it seems like there's little hope to just reform things politically from the inside. But just to say that, I mean, the attitude of the early church was a little bit more, that the focus was a little bit more, let's build up the city of God. And they continued to pray for the emperors that the various Christians there, called by all sorts of flattering names. I mean, I've gotten a good laugh out of Let's Go Brandon, probably more than anybody else. I have a brother named Brandon, so I feel like I have a right to laugh at it a lot. But at the same time, I every once in a while it kind of gets me. I think, those early saints, they were doing all they could to flatter and hopefully eventually kind of convert their emperors. I mean, you read Saint Justin the Martyr's apologies and his different interactions there with both Jews and with the at least aimed at the emperors, and I think it's probably something we could learn a lot from. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. Because the tendency is to become wrapped up with everything that's happening right now. And I know I've seen Fawaz post something like this, and I know Steve's posted it. I forgot the saint who it's attributed to, where if you're not worried, you're worried about what people think about you here, you shouldn't really worry about it, because really the only thing that you need to worry about is how your relationship with God is in the end. Now I want to make a correction. I just said 9.8 billion overall. It's 40 billion in packaging. Now, I was mistaken because it's 9.8 billion in security assistance. So it was 9.8 billion in security assistance, and then just 40 billion for the rest. So then it was what $31 billion to be named later, and pretty much however you want to deal. You spend it on some China, maybe like some, this, that, maybe some roads, maybe a Ferrari, whatever you want to put in there. But it was 9.8 billion in security assistance, and then the rest of it. So there's a little bit different. So most of you actually were right, and I didn't phrase the question correctly. But
everybody was right besides Rick.
Well, I was right, but I just didn't ask the right question. So next time that I have to make sure I am the right phrase.
No, Jonathan is exactly right. I mean, today's the feast of St. Lawrence, and it say that he converted after his death, converted Rome through his actions. I think Augustine even mentioned something like that, and all the idols were gone afterwards. So yes, it's on us, the grace from us to be able to. I mean, yes, politics wise, that's my mindset. But if we don't have the faith leading political reasons, it's just. I mean, you break it up. And we don't convert it, or we don't become more holier, it's for all for naught. There's not. I mean, we're not going to do anything. And I've been saying exactly what Jonathan has said for a long time. Every traditional parish should have converted everywhere around that area. Remember the old parish I was at in Denver? They had a huge Spanish population in the apartments down the street. Why weren't they all coming down the street to our parish? The place is right next to us. I know. One was a Mormon, and I think they still are Mormons. The parishes when they say, "Oh, they put us all in the bad areas of town," great. Let's do something about it. Why would you want them to put? You know what? Let's go right down here and put our legs up and put a lazy boy. Come on in. Name a saint that went through it life at ease. And John Comicus talks about that. It's going to be hard. It's not supposed to be easy. We brought it up last time with the line from League of Their Own. If it was hard, everybody would do it. That's the hard makes it great. So yeah, I mean, that was a church father. That was actually a desert father that Father Abernathy shared about that line of who cares what other people think. He also has another line of don't worry about being burnt out if you never catch fire. That was a great one, I thought. Yeah.
That was a great point. That was a great point because most people just go through the motions in that regard. Hopefully that they think that's enough. But Fawaz, the idea that people are being distracted by the descent of these United States into a supposed banana republic and the opportunities that present themselves, we're kind of missing out on those.
Yeah, no, you're right. I like what Jonathan and Steve was talking about right now. I remember when I was a director of youth ministry, hundreds of teens throughout the year. And a lot of times, I'd sit in my office and they would come after school, and a lot of them would. I called it the chair of tears, and you'd have some of the teenagers would come and kind of talk about what's going on with them. They would come and say, "Hey, can we talk?" Of course, I would always put down whatever I'm doing. It's ministry. It's what's most important. And I realize when it comes to human behavior, after a while of dealing with thousands of teenagers throughout 10 years I was there, I started to realize how much this culture has really affected their intellect to such a degree where they can't even reason when it's right in front of them. The will has just been so corrupted to the point where if it's not based on the lower faculties, they just won't do it. And I think what Steve was talking about here is, why can't we convert those around us? And unfortunately, the gospel calls to repentance, and the gospel calls the intellect and the will to father the lower faculties, and to get us to a point to where the person has perfect command of the lower faculties and virtue. And we don't have a face in the world, or even in the Catholic world, that's like that. Like, there's nobody we can point to that's living today. We can say this is what inner peace really looks like. So to them, there's no attractiveness to it, because they'd rather have the earthism religion giving them whatever they want, the free candy, as we may say. So I think where we should start, my wife and I, we have four kids now, and of course we're dealing with a toddler who has, we're trying to deal with his behavior and trying to correct him, and it's a struggle. Everyone knows who's had kids know that it's just this eternal battle that you're going to go with your children, and you always have to win every single battle, or else they're going to dissent. So I think it starts with our kids, to be honest with you. I think it starts with families. I think one thing that we can do mostly is to invest more time with our families, to win those battles, to eradicate some of their vices, that some of their predisposed vices that they have due to their temperaments, and invest more in that. This is why it's great for you to get married younger, have children younger, and leave the politics to an older person. Should be a male, should be a guy, to go into and represent, who's already raised a family and sent good, decent young adults to society because he's invested in his family. Other than that, it's really going to be the grace of God that's going to do it through our prayers and fasting, because we've gotten to a point where reason has just gone so out the window that in order for these people to amend their life, sometimes they're gonna have to go through some really, really, really tough stuff before they start to wake up and pray to God that they do, or have a holy death. And I think what you were talking about, all three of you guys were talking about, that quote was from St. John Chrysostom, who's an early church father of the Eastern Rite. And so, yeah, I agree. I don't know if there's a political solution to this anymore. I mean, let's just play devil's advocate for a minute here and talk about Trump's role here. He did have some pretty good wins in the primaries. People that he's putting through, who are kind of America first nationalists, who don't want the globalism, they're kind of advancing through. Maybe that might have scared them to kind of intimidate him with this raid. Don't run, because now not only if he wins in 2024, if there's a possibility, and he's not part of the bad guys, if he is with us, and he has America First patriots surrounding him, behind him, then he's really going to pop a pretty big bubble with the globalist agenda, and that might be one of the reasons why they're. So again, we just have to let time explain itself. But other than that, my personal opinion is invest time in your family and make saints out of your children.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good summation of what's going on as far as the raid on Mar-a-Lago and the descent of politics and where we should stand there. So let's move to the second story you guys should know about here on News from the Pew, and that was with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act on Sunday. The biggest point of reference was the expansion of the IRS. Let's take a look.
Guys, and a lot more agents. If a former president can be bombarded at every turn by the FBI and IRS, what hope is there for the rest of us? Here with me now to discuss, MaxFunds.com co-founder and Fox News contributor, Jonas Max Ferris. Yes. So, Jonas, I do not buy KJP's response that no one who makes under $400,000 will be audited. All it takes is one black swan to disprove the universal all swans are white.
Yeah, first of all, it doesn't make any sense, because you would go after where the tax fraud is and where people, if you file a tax return that says you only make $100,000, but you made up expenses of $300,000, you're not going to get audited, they're saying, even by all these new auditors. But if somebody makes $1 million with a W-2 paycheck and then does a bogus $20,000 charitable dog, you're going to go after that person? That doesn't make any sense. Like, you want to go after the most bang for the buck, so taxpayers get the biggest return on this investment in the IRS. So claiming that there's some cutoff is absurd just on the level, because that's not how auditing happens. I mean, I'll add to that, it's very difficult to shake down really rich people because, first of all, they tend to do legal deductions. I know people don't want to hear this, but they work with lots of expensive tax lawyers who work around the Byzantine tax code that Congress stupidly created to legally get their taxes down to 10, 15. There's multiple presidents now, like Mitt Romney, Donald Trump, legally are paying very small percentages of their tax rates. A lot of lower income business owners just make up stuff or lie or make mistakes, and they tend to get caught up in that because those are lies and those are not working around a system that's flawed to start with from its complexity. So there's a lot of easy busts at the low end. They don't fight back with a team of attorneys anyway.
Yeah, and
so the reality is that's where the audits are going to happen.
That's why these high tax environments never work out, and they always have to walk them back. Just, look at France. But the point of this was not necessarily to turn the IRS into even more of a behemoth. It's supposed to reduce inflation. Does having 87,000 new IRS agents do anything to reduce inflation, Jonas?
Yeah, I'm not against fixing the money problems at the IRS, but it has nothing to do with inflation. In fact, hiring anybody is already inflationary. We're at 3.5%.
Here's an idea of how big the 87,000 is, by the way.
Action in this bill to lower the cost for families across the country and to tackle inflation, reduce the deficit, and finally, to really start in terms of addressing climate change at the level that we need to.
Bingo.
When we think about how we lower costs in this bill for families, Zerlina, we make prescription drugs cheaper by
I just want to pause this and speak for Jonathan as being another fellow South Carolinian and apologize for the world for people like Graham and now Harrison.
allowing Medicare to negotiate those lower prices. We lower health insurance costs for almost 13 million Americans by an average of almost $800 a year. We lower energy costs. And this is all paid for by requiring those big corporations to pay their fair share of tax.
Drink. You're muted. Rick, you're muted.
Second. There we go. I'm sending you the job application. Check out the major duties, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to work for the IRS, adhere to the highest standards of conduct. Work a minimum of 50 hours per week. Be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maintain a level of fitness. That's not going to happen. Carry a firearm because you are a person that is enforcing tax code. I don't know why. I think it's 5 million rounds of ammunition. They bought $700,000 worth of ammunition. They got 5 million rounds of ammunition there now. And be willing to use deadly force if necessary, because Rick Barrett decided to use Intuit and, didn't fill out my tax return right. So now they're going to bust down the door and try to take me out for that extra $30 that I didn't claim. Once again, just kind of following in the footsteps of this is what empires do in their death throes. They turn inward and they attack the citizenry. I mean, they've been attacking us, since the federal government unleashed itself. Once it was put on a war footing in the 1940s under Roosevelt. Excuse me. But now we're just going to see even more federal overreach and trying to keep people in line as they squeeze us, Jonathan. Excuse me, for every single dime that we have. I mean, you are not allowed to have anything. I guess this is part of the plan where you own nothing. The fact that they'll have more agents out there, armed agents. I don't know why they necessarily needed to be armed, but they're absolutely making sure that if you have a dime, because that money's got to go to the Ukraine, right? No matter what it is, so they got to get that money somehow. The U.S. government has turned into a I don't want to say the word on air, but I'm pretty sure you all know what I'm saying. I'm trying to get that money. John.
Yeah. Well, here's what I'd say about this. Aristotle's got some really enlightening comments in his Politics on the stabilizing force of what he's calling the mesoi. I mean, basically the middle class. All right, the folks who are neither wealthy by any normal consideration of things, or poor. All right, you're not so destitute that you can't have enough food and don't have clothing and shelter. So I mean, we're talking about the middle class here. And Aristotle just says that those are the people that keep a society stable. All right. Now, I'm not saying that anybody in our current government has ever read or maybe even heard of Aristotle, besides just heard the name. Probably don't have a clue what he's about, what he's ever written.
He's a hip hop.
There you go. There you go. Corn Pop's cousin, maybe. But there's the devil is smart enough to know the genius of Aristotle, and that was taken up and followed by St. Thomas Aquinas, especially in regard to politics. So I can't help but think that the devil knows this, and maybe the movers and shakers behind our current politicians, who are just too idiotic to know their left foot from the right, know enough of that truth to know that if they go after the middle class, and I mean, no matter what the White House said today or yesterday, I mean, it's clear who this would be going after. They're not going after the billionaires or even the multimillionaires, probably, unless they cross the line and do something cancel worthy. So this is to scare us, all right? And so the problem is, as far as I can see it, is it's not simply the few people who maybe in the short term may be harmed by these new IRS agents, but it's the fear that any I'd say average Joe or Jane would have of open up a business that might be stabilizing for their community, might get them, who knows, maybe not much more as far as income goes based on their regular kind of servile job right now, but would be something they enjoy doing, and they'd be investing in their community and just things that are natural and good and healthy for a community. They're going to be scared away from this because of the very fears that Steve was describing well a little bit ago, how someone's breaking some sort of law, federal, if not state, at every second throughout the day because of all the minutiae that are on the books. So this is destabilizing for society because it clearly is targeting the middle class, and the middle class is stabilizing in and of itself just by being there for society, according to Aristotle. So this is bad for any sort of body politic. This is bad news.
Yeah, and Fwaz, the famous saying is above the IRS is essentially this is the price you pay for a civilized society. I don't know how civil the society is when you need the IRS is now going to be larger than the Pentagon and Customs and Border Patrol and a couple of other agencies combined. And the fact is, we're looking at, as John said, destabilization and really just the tightening. It really feels like when you're back and you're dating, your special someone, a girl or a boyfriend or whatever, the further they were moving away, most of the time the instinct was to tighten up because you were afraid of them leaving, which is always a bad idea. But you're seeing the federal government act that way as well. As you're seeing states like Carrie Lake in Arizona, her statements about, the Arizona Republic, you got the free state of Florida doing everything they are. You're getting a lot more people who are getting uppity, I guess you could say. The natural response from the federal government is to unleash the most potent arm they have, which is money collecting, because that's the only one that can really get people to react to.
Yeah, you're right. The political class, what I call the uniparty, because there's no such thing as Democrat versus Republican Party. It's called the uniparty, where you have political establishment characters and players. I mean, it's led by the Democratic Party. You got your Cheneys, your McConnells, and your McCarthys. Those guys are just political oppositions. They're just pretending like this is a democracy that you're in, but we haven't been in one in a long time. Finally, we get some characters right now coming out and saying, listen, we want a new party where it's, nationalist and America first. And they're afraid. And when you're afraid to lose the very thing that you've tried to build and change throughout all these years, so because you have the power to do so, you change the rules of the game. I mean, we saw it when we saw some of the Novus Ordo attendees start, going this way. When you have more funerals and baptisms at a certain parish, that's bad news. And then you had more families at TLM that packed up, outside the door. Everybody's kneeling outside, and things are going this way. You have the power to do so. You kind of change the rules, and you say, "Yeah, we're not gonna give this to you anymore." And it goes to show you that there's no principle there. They'll just do whatever it takes with power, and all the letter bureaucrats and institutions like the FBI and the IRS and the NSA and the NIH and all of those, they're just political arms of whatever political power that's in power right now. They kind of saw that they were losing some power. A lot of American folks have had enough. Trump really lit the fire in folks. I think since 2016, a lot of people's eyes have been opened. People who voted for Romney, voted for Bush, all of a sudden now are seeing those guys to be complete hacks. So you're right. When they're scared, they'll bring out the hammer. And who are they going to go after? Of course, it's going to be the citizens. I don't believe for a second that they're not going after anybody under $400,000. That doesn't make any sense, like the guy said on the news. It makes no sense whatsoever. And you need 80,000 new employees to go after a few billionaires. Give me a break. I mean, who's really funding the government? It's mostly the billionaires. And you can't squeeze them too much because they have the money to fight you back. They also know how to tiptoe behind the laws and manipulate the system, like look for the loopholes. And we don't have the power. We're not Trump. Trump has the money to fight this. As a matter of fact, you should see his campaign right now. He's got the most donations than anybody's ever had, and probably in history in the last 2 days. He's racking in the money. So he's got the money to fight this. I don't. I know a lot of us don't. So it's kind of one of those things where it's keep in line, keep us in power, and we won't bother you. But that never works. So tough times ahead of us, folks. But we have the hope. Like Steve always says, one thing you don't want to lose is lose hope. And I know Ricky been saying that too.
Speaking of yourself, as you can see, I live pretty large, so I can afford to fight anything the IRS says.
Those are cages for tigers, right? You got tigers now?
That's right. I had to put them away because I didn't want anybody to know how it worked. But so, John, I know we're gonna lose you in a little bit. If you want to give us your Saint of the Week and Cry Room before you head out.
Saint of the Week, I would say it's hard to not go with St. Lawrence today. Sorry for anybody who, wanted it instead. But I keep coming back to this because I love comedy myself. But he was hilarious. I mean, come on, who doesn't laugh when he hears "Turn me over, I'm done"? And even back then, you can tell when you're reading the original documents about the interactions he was having with you could say the Roman prosecutors, that what made them more furious than anything else, that he was, effectively mocking them, by saying, "Well, you can turn me over, I'm done on this side." It drove him nuts. So, he's going to be my saint of the day, my saint really forever. Is that it reminds us that we've got to stay involved in humor. We got to find something to laugh at. That's why I don't take it too hard on myself when I say "Let's go, Brendan." But so there's that. The Cry Room. It's whoever it is that's got the crazy idea to have Biden supposedly catch COVID 3 times in a week or whatever it was, whatever the different goofy excuses were. That person deserves to be in the Cry Room. I don't know his or her name. I don't know if it really was Obama or some sort of lackey who.
I'm going to say Jill. I'm going to say Jill Biden.
Very likely, or Michelle Obama.
Well, John, she just wanted to get away from Joe for a little bit, so she's like, "You got COVID. You got to go quarantine for another couple of days." So.
Hey, probably not too far off. So whoever that henchman or hench lady was, definitely deserves to be in the Cry Room.
Yeah, I think she's Jezebel. I call her Jezebel Jill for a reason, and so there's definitely something around that. But one more thing on St. Lawrence, he was hysterical because even before then, when they asked about the treasures of the church, and then he brought him into the room with he's like, "There you go, here's the treasures of the church," and that got him so upset. and he was so impactful, as Steve said before, that he has a higher day. He has a feast day, and he has the day before where you're supposed to fast above the Pope he worked for, the Pope he served, and so it's really crazy in that regard.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine, one of the teens I was when I was doing youth ministry. I told that story once, Jonathan, of St. Lawrence, about on the side. Man, that kid would not forget it. He would come back years later. He would say, "Hey," he'd say, "Man, I told my friends." He'd have his friends come over. We're not Catholics. They tell him about that story, what that guy said. So that really stuck with him. Something that the saint said years ago stuck with the kids to such a degree where he just loved the quote.
That's awesome.
It's a great quote, though.
John, a lot of people are liking John Vianney's story. A couple days ago, if you read Garanger, he talks about how he stopped people going to the taverns, which was the main place of sin in that time. And he didn't put a law. He didn't do anything but change their hearts. So they changed all the hearts of the people that were going, and they ended up closing down. So all we have to do, as Jonathan brought it before, we convert hearts. Maybe we change society. Just crazy thought.
I don't know, Steve. That's a lot. You're asking a lot there, buddy. I don't know. I mean,
maybe we should make a law instead.
Yeah, we'll get the IRS to do it while they're going to your house and checking through your taxes. We'll try to get them. By the way, do you believe in our Lord and Savior Anthony Fauci? Right, we'll go from there and see how it goes in that regard.
Let's bow our head when he says.
Yeah, it's right. While he passes by, in that. So yeah. What? No, it's fine. I don't know what happened there, but we can move on a little. We can move on to our next story here.
Let me throw a couple 2 cents on it for the.
Absolutely, yeah. Before we go.
Yeah, remember that show right there on the Twitter feed. That's how many people were showing up for the IRS thing, and as they mentioned, it's all green economy. That's the main. That's the phrase that pays. It's all about climate change with this thing. It's millions of dollars going in to screw your lives up because of Earthism, the new religion of the state. That's what Ian Davis of pseudo-pandemic calls it. Now, the lower class citizens thing, months ago, probably about half a year ago, I already talked about on Venmo, if you had $601, they were going to audit you. You had to bring it up in your tax report.
You had to include it in your taxes.
Yes. Now on PayPal or Patreon or something like that, if you're under 20,000, you don't have to report those. They don't even send it to you because you didn't make enough. Now you will. As Jonathan brought up, it's going up for the lower people. Anybody that asks for any kind of donation, don't care if you're big or small, you have to now report that thing. So you're going to see people even on, say like OfferUp, the website there. If you're selling something, they ain't selling it now because if you buy that from them, they have to report it. Beforehand, you didn't. Now, because it's tracked, it's on the website, just like a digital ID or digital currency. This is how it comes into it. You're already getting taught how to use these instruments that I have to follow. So now you're like, what? Well, how do I do it? Do I go to Craigslist? Do I do it OfferUp? You can't go there now, because it's now in that system. You can't go, even if you pay cash on OfferUp, it's tracked. The lady, whoever's going to do say sold $600, you have to report that now. So you're already getting, your feet wet for what's coming down, the big thing coming down the pipe in a few years. So this is, it's like that whole thing, $780 billion to decrease inflation. Here's Joe on that.
News that came out today relative to the economy. Actually, I just want to say a number: 0. Today, we received news that our economy had 0% inflation in the month of July. 0%. Here's what that means. While the price of some things went up last month, the price of other things went down by the same amount. The result, 0 inflation last month, but people are still hurting, but 0 inflation last month. Economists look at a measure of inflation that ignores food and energy prices, and they call it core inflation. That's about the lowest amount in several months. When you couple that with last week's booming jobs report of 528,000 jobs created last month and 3.5% unemployment.
Let's stop right there with the job thing. All right, what happened a couple years ago? everybody was shut down. You couldn't do anything. People lost their jobs in the last 2 years over just you had to be shut down. So when you reopen things up, what happens? Oh,
People were allowed to get their jobs
So we got all of a sudden jobs are created because people are now unlock their doors or allowed to go outside or allowed to work. That's not creation. That's you destroyed the world, and then when you let it live again, you say, oh, look what I did. You didn't do anything, and half of that is people that are doing 2 jobs or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And on top of that, there is no place you're not going to find any economist worth their salt that says jobs have anything to do with inflation, with recessions. So you have back-to-back recessions, GDP only. That is the only thing for it. And that's why these guys say, oh, we got good job numbers. That usually doesn't happen in a recession. And then look at the numbers on top of that. Look at the whys behind it too. It's most people see through their what.
It underscores the kind of economy we've been building. We're seeing a stronger labor market where jobs are booming and Americans are working. And we're
you just go down the street and you see help wanted signs everywhere.
Seeing some signs that inflation may be beginning to moderate. That's what happens when you build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. The wealthy do very well and everyone has a chance. It gives everyone a chance to make progress. Now I want to be clear. With the global challenges we face, from the war in Europe to disruption of supply chains and
anybody remember that war going on in Ukraine? You ain't heard about that in weeks, right? It's still, I think it's still going on, but
move on to the next. That's what they do.
You turn that TV off, it doesn't affect you one bit.
Pandemic shutdowns in Asia, we could face additional headwinds in the months ahead. Our work is far from over, but 2 things should be clear. First, the economic plan is working, and second is building an economy that will reward work. Wages are up this month, provide opportunity, help the middle class, and still have work to do, but we're on track. The second point I want to make is we need to pass the Inflation Reduction Act right away. That's the most consequential thing that Congress can do to keep our progress from on inflation.
You can't read the teleprompter right now.
From getting better. From getting worse, keep it moving in the right direction.
Reset.
And it will bring down the cost of prescription drugs, health insurance, premiums, and energy cost. It's going to make big corporations just pay their fair share, nothing more than their fair share. It's going to reduce the deficit without raising a penny in taxes and people making about.
Hey, how do you have how do you have that big of a bill and say you haven't created any money? They print money out of the blue and then send it out and say, we're going to do this. I can't pull up the website. It's the Dub Clock because it will crash the computer. It goes, everyone is pricing it. Just type in debtclock.org or .com, I think it is. And that ticker is just going blinding speed. There's no way that thing ever goes down to zero. And then the whole idea of drug prices and all that, they're just blowing the smoke. There's just a bunch of pork that's going to be in this thing. It's mostly all about the green thing. It's about the kill it. It's the Build Back Better, the World Economic Forum version of this, which they're talking about in China, seeding the clouds to get more water out. They're already doing that in West Australia, and they're having flooding because who you thought you play God, you do something different in the atmosphere, and they can't stop it. Just like they're trying to dim the sun. That will end up being bad down the road, which anybody with 2 working brain cells goes, yeah, that's probably not good. Some hope. I was at the Charlotte Catholic Eucharistic Congress this weekend, and there was a lot of people to watch this show and Clown Planet, among other things, and they know about what's going on. I would bring up a statement like the Nissan thing that Rick brought up last time about they're not selling it, they're going to rent it. And I would say you will own nothing, and they would repeat back, and you'll be happy. Or the housing crash, how this is coming, and their eyes you can see they're connecting the dots of like Ireland. They're going to make you not drive if you're a 4th tier, which is not essential. What was not essential? They would repeat back. So everyone sees a lot of people are seeing what's coming down the pipe. We just need, as Jonathan brought up before, the priests that come on board, the leaders of the faith that come out. We will back you up. Kind of like Lawrence going up to Sixtus. I will be right by your side. And he was. So it's just examples like that. You lead, we will follow. Because again, okay, we live in a decent house we're renting right now. I'm sure everyone lives in a decent house. That doesn't make you, that's not going to put you in heaven. If we lose it, we shouldn't. It's that pray, hope, don't worry thing. Pray, hope, and by God, don't worry. It's an easy thing to say, but it's hard to practice. If in a year or two, our landlord kicks us out and we can't find a place, okay, Deo gracias. Look at the Saints, how they were able to pull that off. We got to have that mindset. That's
You
different.
can stay in one of my cages if you get kicked out. Don't worry about that.
Hey, Rick, we're going down to Rick's place because Rick has a pool and it looks like he's a Mar-a-Lago part D right there. But yeah, they keep the hope, as Lauren said, turn me over. He was getting killed and still can laugh about it. We have to be able to take a punch in the face and smile. What was it? Mother Teresa? The guy spit in her face and she laughed, and now he got something for the kid. So we have to have that attitude, but convert the world, and that includes your neighborhood. That starts with your neighborhood.
It is, and it is going to test more people's faith as things continue to get more chaotic. All right, with this whole thing with Trump and the raid, and everybody's questioning politics, and then you got the IRS, and then you got this. We can bring this in. The majority of this from Breitbart.com. Majority of babies born out of wedlock for the first time in history. This is the idea that society seems to be collapsing in on itself. The issue is, ladies and gentlemen, the society and the world has always been falling apart. It's the world. The world is thy ship and not thy home. And the fact is that this is an opportunity for people to bring people back to the faith and to look at the fact that, hey, if you do have babies out of wedlock, maybe you can work on trying to reconnect with the person and trying to build a life there and moving forward.
Yeah,
but the idea,
what you just said, John Vianney's write-up with Darnage, he mentions that after the French Revolution, there was an increase of devotion and love for the church from the priests that came in, like a Vianney. Yes, his first communion was in a barn because the revolutionaries afterwards, but it made people love the church more. So, like he said, and what happened? They had inflation, they had economic collapse, they had famine. So we haven't seen this. It's not, if you learn history, you won't be doomed to repeat it. So you also be prepared to see what's coming down. You can learn from it and move on and not be afraid of things. Like what Rick was talking about. This has happened before.
Yeah, we have the gift of being fat and lazy, even the most strict of us, to think that this point right now in history is the worst point ever, and that we are the most oppressed, when really we're kind of the most comfortable and fat. And the fact that we're being threatened with this stuff, and our immediate response is to just drop to our knees and cry out to heaven, Lord, why are you doing this to me? It's kind of that meme where it's stop giving me your toughest battles, and then that's a picture of our Lord and Savior. He's like, literally just put down the phone and go outside, because we think it's our toughest battle, and he's like, it's really not. You gotta stop being so dramatic about everything and kind of just calm down here. And I think it's a problem. And Fawaz, you've mentioned multiple times when you were a youth counselor, you saw this kind of stuff, but even up through grown adults who the tendency for us to be governed by the instant impulse of, I guess, for lack of a better term, drama, to react to the worst things that happen and not say, all right, well, it's just bad, but how can we get through it? It's one of these things that mentally, Flaws, we're just not tough.
Yeah, we have more depression than ever before. We have more folks under some, mental breakdown, emotional, impotence, I guess you would call it. This, I guess, this kind of, to me, in a social, if you're running a social program, with the last 100 years, one thing that is proven to me is that human nature is fixed. It's not as fluid as they say it is. We're wired a certain way where we have, look who are the happiest with the saints. That interior peace that nothing in the world could ever, disturb. And with us, it's kind of like, if I only can pay off my debt, then I'll be happy. If I can only have this, then I'll be happy. If I can only pick my gender, if you just leave me alone and pick my gender, I'll be happy. Although the suicide rate, even after surgery, for those folks is higher than, it's still really high. I had somebody brought up and they said, well, it's because they've been bullied throughout this throughout their lives, so they're committing suicide. Well, if that's the case, then we would have seen, for example, the horrors of slavery, the sin of slavery. We would have seen more suicide rate in around that time because they were actually more persecuted than the folks that we are now. But we saw less, and it goes to show you that when you say, "If I just have this, then I'll be happy. If I just have that," you're assuming that exterior things or property, or I'm not saying that things are bad. We should have these things.
Just can't be governed by them.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm really trying to say here is, it's the age-old Saint Augustine thing. Our hearts are restless, so they're resting you, O Lord. And I think you guys are right. We're wired a certain way. We have to act a certain way, and we're a religious creature. We always look for something to worship, even when the whole society is pretty much has given up on Christianity as a whole. If we've seen across the world, what have they done? They found something else to worship: earthism. So it goes to show you that no matter how much you try to change, no matter how much you try to bend that rubber band as far as possible, eventually it snaps back. And eventually it will snap back again. We'll have our time of peace and logic and reason. But as right now, we're pretty low. We're pretty low right now. And nothing's going to make you happy other than the fact of having interior peace. And the world can't give you that.
So many people struggle with that idea of interior peace because how many people go to yoga classes? How many people go to tarot card readers? How many people go to all of these places, astrology? Oh, well, I'm a Leo, and in the fourth moon here, now I should be able. And it's like, come on, people.
Inner and outer chakra.
Make sure your chakra is right. Feng shui your apartment, whatever the case may be. Everybody's always searching for some kind of quick fix. That's really what it is. Oh, well, my tarot card this week said this, or my sign is in the right orbit of moons, or whatever the case. And it's like, no, prayer, fasting, dedication, discipline. Folks, I struggle with this stuff all the time. I struggle with it with temperament. I struggle with it with food. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm even close to perfect. I say routinely, out of the panel here, I'm probably the worst sinner out of everybody. I have no problem admitting that time after time after time, with weight, with temperament, with all of these things. And yet, doesn't mean you give up. It doesn't mean you stop. You have to recommit every single day. And, don't waste the suffering. Don't waste the opportunity to actually, face it and offer it up and continue to work at it. And so that's why we look at the events of this week. And like I said, the air was kind of sucked up out of the room with the issues of Mar-a-Lago and with the issues that came up from the inflation. The Inflation Reduction Act. And the point of this week's show is to tell you that as things seem like it's getting worse, continue to work through it. Right, Steve?
I was okay. I was like, I won't say what another event that happened what I did during it, but when I saw this Mar-a-Lago thing, I went, it was that Kermit meme.
Oh, with the tea.
Sipping tea. I don't know, divorce? Everyone's complaining about XYZ. Here's a simple solution. It should happen. Break away from the dysfunctional union. Give me an argument to stay in. Is it the Olympics? I like using it because that's just dumb.
The NFL, Steve. We got to stay for the NFL and football and the F-16s.
Well, baseball, you have teams in Canada. You can have teams. I would tell you also, I've been 7-8 years ago, I read this book for Lent. It's The Ladder of Divine Ascent by John Climacus. And one of the Father Abernathy's doing a series on his podcast, Podbeam, and I've been out putting it on video on my thing. So I'm a few months behind, but if you wanted to go live, you go to his. And he's reading it chapter by chapter or paragraph by paragraph each time. So it's going to take a 3-year project. Anyway, here's an idea on hope that he brings. This is on page 246. And if you ever want the icon, if you've never seen it, that's what the icon looks like.
Right.
And St. Philip Neri said he used 2 books, Cassian's Conferences and The Ladder of Divine Ascent. Philip Neri he's a pretty good guy, and he called Rome his own desert. But it says, hope is a wealth of hidden riches. Hope is a treasure of assurance of the treasure in store for us. It is a rest from labors. It is the door of love. It is the annulment of despair. It is the image of what is absent. The failing of hope is the disappearance of love. Toils are bound by it. Labors depend on it. Mercy encircles it. A monk of good hope. Now, this is written to monks, but you can use it for yourself. A monk of good hope is a slayer of despondency. With the sword, he routs him. And there's way more gold again, and he goes on with this. Just a fraction of the thing. But anyway, I used it back in, like I said, Lent of 7-8 years ago. I still remember where I was and how I was when I was reading it. It's a life-changing book. So find it, get it. I'm begging some press companies to republish it, but you can get this one. If you email me, I'll send you the link. I'll put it in the show notes. But that why not? Or where you can get that specific one, because it got some good photos in there as well, and you get the icon too. But that was where I got. That was from his podcast. That's where I got that line of him talking about a priest saying, "Don't be ever afraid. Don't be afraid to burn out if you never catch fire." Because why? Who's going to tell? And he goes. It's contrary to modern thought to be a fanatic. Forgot you're okay. It's okay to see a guy with the Dallas Cowboys shirt or whatever team you love, wearing it with a hat, jacket. His car's got the star on it all over. He's got a flag flying on it. He knows every team, every member of the team, knows every play, has seen every game, has the tickets, goes where tailgate prior, wears his liturgical outfit to the game, stays afterwards, gives us Thanksgiving, and wholesome in between. It's not in line for modern society to be a fanatic or a religion. That's what we got to be on fire. What's the worst thing you can do? Somebody say you're a nutcase? Fine. We are nutcases. Be that kind of nutcase for that, so that you spread the truth and you show the hope in this crazy, I'll put the clown thing back on, clownish world. So that you have, hey, why is that guy happy? The whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. No, I'm sorry, in a freight train. But that guy's happy. Why? And then people start happy. And then invite him to mix.
Yeah, that whole idea is pretty well articulated in that regard, because at this point there is no reason to be despaired, because you can't take anything with you. I know it's such a secular phrase, but when you were describing that, Steve, I've seen videos of guys in the Dallas Cowboys who have rooms that look like your office right now, except it's jerseys, it's footballs, it's everything, wall to wall. These people have to put at least $25,000 worth of like these giant TVs and all this other kind of stuff. And I used to be a huge sports fan before COVID. I used to be a huge one. Now I haven't seen an NFL game, an NBA game, none of that stuff in 2.5 years. And honestly, it doesn't really bother me. I don't understand how these people operate.
That was my childhood room. We had posters up on all the walls. Our dorm, we had the same thing. We were my dad ran a sports bar. We had it all over the place. That was our life was sports. So now is when someone says, "Hey, look I got photos all over this room." That's just this room. It's from a little 11x7 Vistaprint. Wait for the end. I get a cheap frame and I put some photos that no one ever sees before up. But that's used to be that's how I had like Larry Bird or Magic or Michael and baseball player. Baseball one wall, football another wall. I still, I have those jerseys. I used to have jerseys. I lined the wall up with jerseys when I was in college. So that's different. You change this. This is the same thing what I had, except the real stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that matters. Flaws having kids, and you mentioned having four children. The idea of trying to keep them on the right path and trying not to get distracted with things like idolizing sports figures or movie stars or entertainers or any of these other kinds of stuff. You said it earlier, and in case anybody forgot, you have to win those arguments that you have. You have to establish the framework, and a lot of people don't want, let the kid develop it. Nah, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. Don't let them develop. It's your job as a parent, and I don't have kids, but I was a teacher for a while. It's your job to mold them. It is your privilege as a parent to mold that mind to be ready for when it becomes an adult.
Yeah, and you also have a responsibility to society too, because God has given you these kids for the number one purpose is given to you. Women have this something in them that they cooperate with the creation of God that no other creature in the world does, and the personhood to where a bear can produce a bear, and a dog produces a dog, but when that dog dies, the soul, the spirit of that dog no longer exists after that. Women are the only ones, mothers are the only ones that actually can cooperate with them, with God, and to create a person that is going to move on to eternity. The soul is never going to perish. So there's an incredible treasure there. And not only that, but you also have the responsibility, number one, to God, to make sure that the crown, like Fulton Sheen says, there's a crown waiting for the jewel, waiting for them in heaven. And woe to those parents who don't make their kids aware of that crown that's in heaven. That's number one. And number three, you also have a responsibility to society in order for that you are going to help these children grow to become good model citizens, so they can go out into the world, so that the world is not burdened by your laziness or you're incompetent as a parent. Because if you just have children and neglect them, and now they have all these trauma and troubles, you've now sent them out to the world, and we got to deal with them because you didn't do your job, or we didn't do our job. Yeah. So we have a responsibility not only to ourselves, to God, but also to society as well. And it's a battle, it also takes prudence. You have to know where to back up, so you're not too authoritative, because they end up, hating themselves. But you also have to be so involved and invested to look at your 8-year-old and say, my 8-year-old, he's a sanguine, and I know what temperaments come, what vices come through the temperaments of a sanguine. And I look at it and I say, okay, he might struggle. For example, I'll say this, sanguines normally struggle with forms of pleasure, food, the sixth and that commandment, as they get older, or just laying there, just being lazy. Sanguines are more they like the lower pastures of pleasure. Where if I'm pushing my kids on the swing, I would actually push my sanguine child less time, and to people be like, well, that's not being fair to him. Well, I'm just trying not to allow his temperaments, which are he's predisposed to certain vices, get to the point where he has to have control over those as he gets older. Because if I'm not going to strengthen his will, then he's going to just go ahead. Those pleasures are like, he's going to keep feeding the beast, and the concupiscible and the concupiscible appetite is never going to be fed to satisfaction. So they're going to keep feeding it. So you really have to look at your child individually and say, what are their vices, what are they not? Just trying to pluck some of these out of them. Be prudent, and also have virtue as well. Have virtue. Virtue's in the means. Don't be overly scrupulous to where like they can't watch TV for the rest of their lives ever. All that does is teach the child when he gets older and he hasn't gotten a sense of television, he just binge watches. Just like when there's no sobriety, in the household, he gets older, he sees alcohol for the first time at 21, he just goes crazy and becomes an alcoholic. So you can't have one way or the other. You can't be excess or defect. Just have the prudence. But it's an everyday investment. You wake up every single day, you look at your children and say, okay, what can I eradicate? Where are we going to fight? Having 4 kids under 8 years old and under, it's a battle and it's exhausting. But if you're not going to bed exhausted, you didn't do your job right.
So you're telling everybody not to move to that footloose town?
What is it?
So you're telling everybody not to move to that. All right, Steve, go.
I just don't get any sleep. That's why I'm exhausted.
Yeah. I mean, San Alfonso didn't sleep either.
One of the things that was brought up was the TV. There's a thing, if you look at Corbett's video from the day or yesterday, he talks about that, and he's reading someone else's book on it. He goes, it's not it's not how you watch or where or how many hours you watch, but what you watch or how you. Yeah, it's not how, but what you're watching. Because the article out about most people spend 11 hours a day, almost half of the day on phone or email or media, something of anything. And that's kind of weird because you're watching this on a media thing. So he's not telling people to get off media per se, but be better at what you're doing. It's kind of like how you practice, get better at how you practice in a sport or anything like that. You can, why are you wasting time on Twitter or something? Which Twitter is, you talk about, you scan through, you just got yourself a half hour of doing absolutely nothing, and it brings out your inner bad person because you see a tweet and you condemn them to the fourth level of hell, and you've never spoken to that person before, but you're the most uncharitable person on a tweet. So why are you doing that? Like on Sense Fidelity TV, you can watch Father R's 4-part series on the stage of church, which includes Q&A, or Darren Jay's readings for the day, or things like that. Fawaz, or Rick's show. Rick has a show. Everybody, you go to the Barrett Brief and check out his thing. I mean, it's how you're spending the time, not if you're watching it. As Fawaz was talking about, because some people get the whole idea, cut it all out, and that goes back to the drinking. Puritan drinking or Protestant drinking versus Catholic drinking. In the Catholic world, in Italy, you get to partake in the wine 7 years old or 10 years old. It's not the forbidden fruit. So when you go to college at the USSA, you're now drinking, and everyone in Europe, what's wrong with these people? But I think those guys are now, since they've lost the faith, they're getting into that now. They're overindulging. So everything's tied to the faith. You don't have the faith, you lose everything. It's an umbrella that you have to have this right. If you don't, you're going to screw up the rest of your life.
I would add this too, but I'm going to be. Go ahead, pause.
I'm sorry, brother. I would add this too, Steve. Like I said, my 8-year-old, he's a sanguine, and he finds pleasure in eating snacks while he's watching something. He has to, he wants to eat something, and I put a pretty strict limit to that because of moderation. Because if he gets used to that, it's just feeding the lower faculties to the point where he's just going to be becoming fat later on because he just loves pleasure and food. That's what sanguines do. This is the problem. But by the way, sanguines are the easiest to make into saints. They're the easiest to make into saints, but they have some vices that you have to, eradicate. So, I say, okay, maybe on Wednesdays, if he's going to watch a show with his brothers, maybe you can have a snack. But other than that, you're not doing that, throughout the other days that, we do TV 3 days a week. And on Saturday, it's a family movie night. We're all watching together. So, something like that, too, that you have to be careful with as well. Everything has to be done in moderation. So, yeah, you're right, Steve.
All right. So in that regard, let's move on to Saint of the Day and or Saint of the Week and our cry room now. So let's start with Fawaz. Do you have a Saint of the Week and a nominee for the cry room?
I do. Yeah, my Saint of the Week is actually going to be these two Little League baseball players. I saw a video of this one kid who threw a pitch and hit this other the pitcher threw the batter and hit the batter in the head, the helmet. Kind of batter went down for a little bit, and he went down to first base. It was really interesting seeing, because a lot of times, especially younger folks, the fact that the pitcher was in distraught and in tears of what he potentially, he would have harmed the batter. That's a soft, kind-hearted child, kid. And the reason I say that is because that's it right there. We don't have that for humanity anymore. We've been so desensitized to other people. Look at he kind of gave him a hug, saying, I'm okay, you're doing great. And the fact that pitcher was still crying about it goes to show you he's got a heart for humanity. And we as Christians need to have that. We need to have a soft spot for humanity. And even in our worst enemies, we need to pity them to the point to where, we have to have spiritual tears for them as well. So I thought those two were my saints of the week. And my, what is it called? My cry room of the week. I got to put him in there. I got to put Trump in there. It's like, Ray was your pick for the FBI, and you had this chance to drain the swamp the 4 years that you're there. You had the chance to do it. You want to do it for your second term, but you should have done it your first. And you had 4 years. You had the House. You had the Senate for 2 of those years. You should have drained the swamp. It came back to bite you in the behind. So I put you, Donald, and I pray for you, definitely, but I put you in the cry room. You're muted, bud.
And down in the cry room. There you go. Big deal there. So, all right, Steve, what do you got?
That'll get everyone some fans.
Hey, it's all right. Don't worry about it.
Part of me thinks it's all planned anyways, just to get it more votes. So, My saint will be, I'm going to use Father Abernathy because if you go to his podcast, he's been doing this for years.
He's awesome.
Church fathers, and he's been solid on this. Father Matlack, a good friend of mine, is a Byzantine priest down this way. He does both rites. He was telling me, because I was in the first class, you can hear me asking a question. This guy knows his church fathers inside and out. So check out his Podbean. I'll put it in the show notes. It goes back, like I said, quite a few years, and very solid resources for education. If people were listening to that like they were on all these other guys that put out the videos on how bad the church is over and over and over and over again, maybe we could do something better than just complain. Which, you have my thoughts on that. Cry room, man. Let me throw C-Plan, not C-Plan. That's CPAC. That's C-Plan. My bad, Mike. That's a Catholic family pro-life group here. They were by me at the table. I'll say CPAC because every conservative or every CPAC, it's all about rah, 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 USA, vote us in and we'll get things better for you. And we'll do this, and we'll do that. And nothing ever changes. And just drives me bad. I used to be one of those big fans. I would watch CPAC. There's something about what happened this week that I just is getting my spidey senses going. Watch out, don't cave into what the media is telling you on this. There's something because it makes no sense on the whole ripping up of the papers, throwing it in the toilet, and all of a sudden someone found it in the toilet. There's something else going on, and I think it's something about getting the base for Trump activated and get him back in. Because if everyone's really consistent, why not be on Santana's? How come I can't speak? The guy in Florida.
DeSantis
side. Why not be on DeSantis' side on this? You already have for Trump. Why would you? Is it because he sells a lot of hats? Hill Dog's selling hats right now for emails. It's just weird. I don't know. Everything about me right now is saying there's something off about what happened with this thing. Just don't buy bite into it. And also, if you're watching more audio, more video of what happened in Key Largo or Mar-a-Lago than you are about the faith, I will throw you in the cry room too.
Yeah, there are some that say that this whole thing is to activate the extremists on the right into a violent reaction in order to clamp down even harder, because they did release that the militia violent extremists letter where if you have anything that is not, supporting Bernie Sanders, if you have a Gadsden flag or if you have a Second Amendment thing or a Revolutionary War image, you're now a domestic violent extremist or a militia violent extremist or whatever they call it now. So there is you need to definitely not be governed by lower faculties in the response, because of course there were the idiot LARPers who are like, it's Civil War 2.0. It's like, sweetheart, if it's Civil War 2.0, you're not going to be able to tweet about it.
Well, and just remember, after Trump won presidency, his inauguration breakfast, I should find the video on it. He thanks, quote unquote, my good friends, the Clintons over there. Stand up and give them applause. That was days after lock her up, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. And all his fans were parodying the same thing. Lock her up. Hey, it's like a WWF thing. But then afterwards, they're all BFFs. So
in the back room.
Yeah, if there's something fishy about it.
What?
So they broke the kayfabe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So for me, I'm gonna put my saint of the week is the passing of David McCullough. If you don't know who David McCullough is, he is the author of the John Adams book. He is also the author of the Truman book, probably the last real titan of academia out there before all these idiot social justice warriors trying to tell you Alexander Hamilton was gay and all this other kind of stuff. McCullough was a real one, and eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and that perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. Had a good life, died at the age of 89, and I have a very macabre look at that. If you live past the age of 80, I will pray for you, but I'm not really sad about it because that's a pretty good life. So for me in the cry room, Liletta James, the Attorney General of New York, who apparently is just a scorned lover and has sued Trump, or has subpoenaed Trump, Eric Trump, I think she's even subpoenaed the dogs of the Trumps to come and testify. So she is in my my cry room for this week because she encompasses the psychotic nature of the left and how desperate they are to get anybody they feel or is in the way or distract or whatever the case may be, or build themselves up more power and political prestige. All right. So that's it for this week's News from the Pew. Like, subscribe, and share the News from the Pew. And we thank you for joining us. We'll talk soon. And now, always and forever, Viva Cristo Rey.